Welcome back to Vivid Noise, and this time I want to talk about a little game which ended up turning into something a lot bigger, but I still prefer the little game. To those unaware, Nitronic Rush is a game made by a team of what would have been at the time students at the DigiPen Institute of Technology, known as Team Nitronic. It was notable at the time for being a free game which offered more fun factor and polish than a lot of AAA games, and honestly to this day, it's still an extremely fun game, and I'm going to talk about exactly why I still enjoy it so much, even over its own properly funded sequel called Distance. While on the surface, Nitronic Rush just sort of looks like another racing game, you might have been able to tell already that it's a lot more than just that. This isn't a racing game. This is a driving survival challenge type game. That on its own makes this game stand out quite a bit because we really don't get many of these, or at least not games of that kind that are this well made and free. The standard driving controls are, well, standard. You just have accelerate and brake. You don't even get any gears to shift through, but you do kind of need that simplicity with what the game is going to be demanding from you. It's pretty clear just by looking at the footage that this game has a sort of boost system, and what's different about it is, unlike let's say a Sonic game with the boost or something like that, it's actually unlimited, but not really unlimited. You see, to stop it from genuinely being unlimited, apart from in certain stages, the game has a heat system, which means that the more you use your boost, the more your car heats up and will eventually explode if you don't cool it down. And that's where the trick system and checkpoints come in. See, checkpoints automatically cool your car all the way down, whereas doing tricks, depending on how complex they are, will cool your car down more. It's really cool how you essentially have two methods of keeping your boost active, which appeal to two different kinds of playstyles. You might want to focus more on doing tricks, which will obviously cool you down, or you just want to be a speedrunner and just go for everything as quickly as possible, which will also allow you to get to the next checkpoint faster and therefore cool you down as well. And speaking of getting to the next checkpoint faster, this leads me to the game's flight system. So you might not see me using it too often in this footage, but your car can transform into a sort of plane. You know, think Sonic All-Stars Transformed, but on the fly. No pun intended, but now you're probably thinking, what's the point of having platforming challenges if you could just fly over them? Well, that's the thing. Flying is actually a lot slower in this game, or at least it feels like it's slower. So while you're avoiding a lot of the challenge, you're also worsening your time. Not to mention that once you decide to go back onto the track, you won't be able to boost as much because flying also heats your car up. This is an extremely clever way to limit what could have potentially been an overpowered ability, and allows for the level design to really shine through, because I really do want to talk about how good this game's level design is. You're not going to see anything too insane for this video since I'm only playing the story levels, but once you're done with those, you can play these hardcore stages, as they're called, which contain some really devious platforming challenges involving wall riding, ceiling riding, very precise jumping, and a lot of those stages actually straight up disable the flight mechanic, which feels like a bit of a waste, but it really does allow the game to be as challenging as possible. And yes, I am deliberately leaving out those stages, not just because it would take me far longer to get good takes for the video, but also because I don't want to spoil them. This game is free, it runs on basically anything despite how good it looks, so please, when you're done with this video, or even before you're done with it, go and download this game. It's only like 300 megabytes, play it. What makes the levels so fun isn't just the fact that they're difficult, because I've already talked about how difficulty doesn't equal fun, and also lack of difficulty doesn't equal fun. It's a fine balance between the two, but it's more so the fact that the game taps into its racing game aspect and just has an incredibly good sense of flow. While it will take you a while to memorize the courses so you can just blast right through them, once you've done that, it is a sensation that I cannot compare to any other game of this kind. Not just because there's not that many games of this kind, to be fair, but even like a traditional platformer, this does things that a normal platformer, even like a Sonic game for example, which would be focused on speed, not even that could replicate this. Although now that I think about it, it would be pretty sick if someone could mod these stages into the Infinity engine or the Bumper engine, or even like the Generations engine, you know, something like that. I don't really know enough about level design specifically to really break down exactly what makes these levels so fun, but it's gotta be just the options that you have and the alternate pathways that you get depending on whether or not you fly or just stick to the road, or how much air you get off of a ramp, stuff like that. It's simple, but it works really well. And now there's something else I want to bring up, and that's to do with this game's sequel. See, in a way, Nitronic Rush retroactively became an extended demo for what would end up being that same development team's future project, Distance. You might be a little more familiar with that game since it got a proper release on Steam and everything, but it's essentially the same thing but with very different aesthetics and some slightly new mechanics. The way Distance expands upon Nitronic Rush's mechanics is fine, but it really doesn't do enough to set it apart if you ask me. Do I imagine the developers probably didn't want to push things things too far, again, just because of how different this kind of game is. The main reason why I was never really too interested in Distance, apart from benchmarking my at the time new laptop obviously, was its presentation. It's just so dull and dark and cold, and I understand that's what the developers were going for, and they did it really well, and the game looks really good, you know, graphically, but it's just not an aesthetic that personally interests me for a racing slash platformer kind of game. I can see that dystopian sci-fi aesthetic working a lot better for maybe a shooter or something, but not this. On the other hand, Nitronic Rush is just a dance party on your screen. The colors, the bloom, the soundtrack, and yes, Distance has a pretty good soundtrack too, but this shit is full of bangers, and they're so memorable. Seriously, before making this video, I hadn't played Nitronic Rush in possibly 10 years, and yet hearing just small snippets of each track instantly made the whole thing flood back into my mind. Honestly, Nitronic Rush might be one of the only games to genuinely have an appealing take on that Tron sort of aesthetic, because it's very easy to mess up. It's something about the exact shades of each color that it uses, because some games will maybe lean a little too heavily into the brighter blues or maybe the greens or whatever it might be. Here the colors I feel are just right. Not to mention that it's also quite customizable. As you can see, I've turned the motion blur off for this video, and I was thinking of turning the bloom off, but no, if you ask me, it's an essential part of the look, although if you want, you can turn that off too. I understand that my preference towards one game over the other is super subjective, and it's all just a matter of the way the games present themselves. Honestly, if you enjoyed Nitronic Rush, buy Distance, support the developers because they did a great job, and Distance in of itself is a great game. It's just not different enough to me to warrant playing that over something else which looks and sounds more appealing. As I said earlier, I only got Distance when it came out so I could see if my laptop at the time could run it, which it does. It's a well-optimized game. To be fair though, since Distance does have some pretty strong fan-made creation support, I could definitely see the argument for buying it if you like Nitronic Rush, even if you're not a fan of the aesthetic, because there's always those fan-made levels which might tap back into that original look, and in general it's just more content. So really just think of Distance as a massive expansion upon what was already a very big game for zero cost. Because Nitronic Rush, even in of itself, had a ton of levels. It had these community challenge stages and hardcore stages, so you were already getting a lot of bang for no buck. So I'd say go for it. Get Distance and just get even more of this if you like it. And with that, I think it's time to wrap up another episode of Vivid Noise. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I also hope you check out the game, and I'll see you guys next time.